Hey, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ethan.
So I have got Dr. Anya Sharma here. She's an economics professor at Columbia who wrote The Domino Effect.
Yes.
And we're diving into Lehman Brothers today.
Yeah, this chapter really gets into the culture stuff, how confidence just turned into this complete catastrophe.
Okay, so I was reading that Lehman was the place every college kid wanted to work. MBAs, you name it. Why was everyone so obsessed with getting in there?
Well, think about it. Lehman was founded in 1850. They survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars. People saw them as the survivor institution. That breeds serious pride, you know.
Wait, like swagger? They actually had swagger back?
Oh, yeah, total swagger. The book literally says there was a lot of pride and that once you were there, nothing was really impossible to achieve. That kind of culture just rewards being bold.
Laughing, that becomes arrogant though, right?
Yes.
Like Fuld's name is all over this story.
Absolutely. Every single employee at Lehman knew who their CEO was. And get this, Fuld had like 95% of his wealth tied up in Lehman stock.
That's insane. So he's literally betting everything on the firm growing.
Exactly. His incentives were completely aligned with growth at any cost. The book ties his leadership style to this whole we know best mentality.
So the pay structures were literally pushing people toward dangerous bets.
Yes.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so remuneration and bonuses made short-term profits the only thing that mattered. When your metric is immediate money, long-term stability just gets ignored.
Which brings us to securitization, right? The book calls it the brainchild of this new generation of bankers.
So securitization turned your home mortgage into a tradable product. Lenders sold mortgages, investment banks bundled them into these things called CDOs, then sold those worldwide.
Wait, so my neighbor's mortgage becomes someone else's investment in
Yes.
Japan?
Yeah.
And people didn't know what was actually in those bundles?
Exactly. The material says ordinary investors often had no clue whether they were holding subprime or prime mortgages. Stuff was packaged and sold as prime when it totally wasn't.
Subprime, that's borrowers who normally wouldn't get credit, right? Why lend to them if it's risky?
Because they made money. As the book puts it, to investment bankers, these people were making the money. Banks thought the profits would outweigh the losses.
Like you're all dancing on a table and nobody's looking at the cracks underneath.
Right? And the cracks started showing by late 2006, early 2007. Housing prices fell, defaults climbed, but Wall Street still thought they could control the risk.
Were there people at Lehman who disagreed? I remember reading about some internal doubts.
Yeah, there were. Anthony Ath in the UK and others voiced opposition. They clashed with the U.S. leadership. The book mentions there's this fundamental disagreement between London and America.
That's wild. Internal checks failing because the CEO just overruled them. How did regulators see all this?
Regulators were getting worried, especially after Bear Stearns collapsed in early 2008. The Fed and JP Morgan had to bail out Bear, and that sent alarms everywhere.
Wait, Bear Stearns got bailed out.
Yeah.
But Lehman didn't. Why the different treatment?
Moral hazard concerns. Some regulators argued that bailing out Lehman would just incentivize other banks to take reckless risks, expecting rescues.
So the decision not to bail out Lehman was partly philosophical, don't reward recklessness, but it had massive consequences.
Yeah, the text talks about these frantic weekend meetings in September 2008. Paulson and Wall Street leaders scrambling, but unlike Bear Stearns, no federal bailout came.
That weekend, and then September 15th, 2008. That's the moment, right?
It's the day. Monday morning, September 15th, 2008, Lehman was bankrupt with $613 billion in debt. The shockwave was immediate and global.
That's $613 billion. Holy shit. But what about the human side? Employees, regular investors?
Emotionally devastating. The chapter describes employees leaving with boxes and retail investors in Singapore losing their life savings. On nearly 10,000 people, about $340 million affected.
Singapore. I remember the mini bonds thing. There was this guy, Mr. Tan.
Yeah, Mr. Tan invested $50,000 in mini bonds after being told they were safe. When Lehman collapsed, those notes defaulted. Some people even got sick from the stress.
That's brutal. But the regulators in Singapore took action afterwards, right?
They did. MAS tightened regulations, sanctioned banks, in some cases banned the sale of these structured products for up to 2 years.
It's crazy. A Wall Street collapse led to street protests in Hong Lim Park, laughing.
Financial drama became very real, human drama. Yeah, absolutely. The chapter describes almost 1,000 demonstrators in October 2008. Biggest demonstration in that park's history. People were pissed about their retirement savings.
Pez or some come from back. Think incentive. But the book keeps hammering. Pay. culture, arrogance. Could Lehman's collapse have been prevented if the culture changed earlier?
The material suggests culture played a huge role. When the CEO rewards risk and the firm cries as short-term wins, internal warnings get ignored. So yeah, culture change could have altered everything.
But was it just Lehman or industry-wide? Other banks are making obscene profits too.
Industry-wide, the chapter notes the top 10 bankers sold $1.5 trillion of mortgage securities in 6 years. This is systemic, not isolated.
1.5 trillion. That's staggering.
And Bear Stearns was like a warning sign that this house of cards had problems.
Right. And Stearns was a major signal, and regulators started asking hard questions, but the opacity made it hard to know where the bodies were buried.
Speaking of opacity, these CDOs were incredibly complex. Retail investors couldn't possibly understand them.
That feels unfair.
The chapter makes the same point. Promotional brochures and salespeople promised safety and 4 to 5% returns, while the products were tied to multiple institutions, including Lehman.
The product could be linked to 8 entities.
Yes.
One defaults, and the entire thing defaults. That's a chain reaction.
Yeah, those linkages turned a single failure into a network failure. That's why Lehman's fall rippled into Hong Kong, Singapore, everywhere.
There's also the moral hazard argument. Some economists, Dr. Sumit, said, why use taxpayer money to rescue bankers?
Yeah.
What did the book say about that debate?
Well, it shows the tension. Rescuing firms prevents immediate collapse, but rewards risk-taking. Letting them fail risks contagion. Policymakers were totally split.
And Fuld had to scramble for 2 days before markets open. Turn to Bank of America, Barclays. I can't imagine that pressure.
Yeah, the account is frantic. Then Friday and the weekend had intense negotiations. By Sunday night, no deal materialized. And Monday, markets opened to bankruptcy news.
The human collapse is striking. Seeing a 15-year-old firm vanish overnight, that's like watching a city barn.
Yeah, the chapter captures that grief. Employees were stunned, people still carrying business cards and gym bags. For many, it felt like the death of an institution.
And then you have Fuld later showing up to inquiries and still walking away with millions. And people were asking, is this fair?
Yeah, Fuld had been paid tens of millions over the years. The optics after Lehman's fall were ugly. For victims, it felt totally unjust.
Murmuring, the industry bounced back fast after a few years. The chapter warns about short memories.
Yeah, it warns the bankers have short-term memories and crises repeat because incentives and culture aren't fully reformed. The author's confident there will be another banking crisis someday.
Provocative. And but are we doomed to repeat it? Or can regulation actually change behavior long term?
Regulation can help. Post-crisis rules like higher capital requirements emerged, but culture and incentives need constant attention too.
That chapter mentions stress testing in Singapore. Did that actually help calm markets there?
Yeah, SGX ran exposure checks, stress test, engaged with Lehman management, prepared for worst-case scenarios, but the shock still spread because of those product linkages we talked about.
So let me quick danger. How big was Lehman at its peak? Give me the snapshot.
By 2007, over 25,000 employees, around $19 billion in revenues. Fourth largest U.S. investment bank at the time.
No wonder its collapse felt apocalyptic. Now, the book also highlights these glamorous lifestyles, dinners costing thousands.
Yeah. So Dr. Sumit talks about $1,000 to $8,000 dinners. The extravagant lifestyle showed how disconnected top bankers were from everyday consequences.
And the social impact is huge. Thousands lost life savings in Singapore alone. That's not abstract numbers. That's people's lives.
The chapter drives that home. Victims, elderly investors who didn't understand prospectuses, then collapsing on the street. The human toll was severe.
Did the book quote Fuld directly? I recall something about an extraordinary time for our industry.
Yeah, on September 10th, 2008, Fuld said, "This is an extraordinary time for our industry and one of the toughest periods in the firm's history." In hindsight, understatement.
Yeah, understatement is right. I always mention. And any bright spots? Did any Lehman leaders foresee the collapse?
Some did voice worries. The UK chief and others raised alarms, tried to slow exposure, but they were outvoted by the dominant US leadership focused on growth.
So checks and balances failed internally. Externally, post-collapse, did they criminally prosecute executives?
Comments largely no. Few profile criminal convictions for top executives. That created anger among victims who felt there was no accountability.
That lack of accountability must have stung, especially when execs kept huge pay packages.
It did. People asked, is this fair during increase? Many believe it was systemic failure, not just bad apples, but consequences fell on ordinary investors and employees.
Quick little hypothetical. If Lehman had been forced to shrink instead of double down, could things things have been different?
Musing possibly de-risking earlier, reducing leverage, spinning off risky units could have reduced contagion, but that requires leadership willing to sacrifice short-term gains.
Angela Clarence, and we circle back to culture and leadership. Any vivid anecdote from the chapter that sticks with you?
I keep coming back to elderly investors in Singapore, unable to read complex prospectuses, then collapsing on the street. That human picture lingers.
Me too. I'll wrap up. What should listeners remember from this chapter?
Culture and CEO incentives can warp risk-taking. Securitization created global linkages that hid real exposures, and regulatory gaps left the system fragile, with real human costs.
I'll add transparency and investor protection aren't optional. They are safety valves. Thanks for walking me through this massively.
Yeah, this was fun.
All right, catch you later.
Yeah.